Hello everyone. This 40k video will be different. Won't be going over my thoughts on any particular units or keywords, but rather I'll be going over and breaking down one of my armies that I've played in Warhammer 40k. So this video will be about my Chaos Space Marine list and what it currently comprises of, and my explanations behind why I have fielded these units. So without further ado, let's get into it, and I hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so getting into the list. So this is on New Recruit. So for those of you who may be curious, as how am I looking at this? How am I viewing this? This is New Recruit. As a disclaimer or as a setup, I do play Warhammer 40k primarily on Tabletop Simulator, primarily because I do not have the requisite points amount of models to play a in-person game of 40k. So the only real way I can get into playing a game of 40k is through Tabletop Simulator. But moving on into the list, this is a 2,000 point army, 2,000 point game list. The total points cost of the army is 1,980 points. There's a little bit of overhead. Now, for the detachment, it is currently Creations of Bile. That is the detachment I've had the most fun playing. I have experimented with Renegade Raiders. I've experimented with Veterans of the Long War just a little bit. Overall, those three detachments are my preferred detachments. Although the design process of going and making this list has been detachment agnostic. I've not really focused on yes, the detachment is gonna be what is the anchor point of everything. Though for the sake of this list, it is a Creations of Bile list. It is very infantry heavy. So moving away from what detachment and game size, we're going to move into the epic heroes. And these are the only two characters I have in the entire army. In the past, I used to have two Masters of Executions. I used to run some Chaos Lords. This iteration of the army doesn't have anything other than the epic heroes. And the epic heroes would be Fabius Bile. He is the warlord of the army. That is to get the most bang for my buck out of Creations of Bile. But he is attached to a unit of Chosen, which we'll get down to that in a little bit. And then we have Vashtor the Archifane. Now, originally in the past with Vashtor, I used to run him as a deep strike, beat stick for going after vehicles. I found that the usefulness of doing that for him wasn't bad. It wasn't he couldn't get his points back and then some in doing that. But I found that it was more often than not he would be put into bad situations, even though he has his whole hey, shoot me at your peril kind of ability. It I didn't weigh it out as it was a pro. Moving down from characters, from epic heroes and characters. Excuse me, I apologize. We get down to battle line. So for battle line units that I have in my list, I have one unit of 10 cultists, and their whole job is just sticky home field objective and then screen out my deployment zone as best they can with what they are. Of course, given certain secondary draws, they're also there to perform actions like sabotage or establish locus. So they're there for your standard, I guess you'd say, chaos cultist use cases. Sticking an objective and then just kind of piss off. I'm running 3 units of 5 Legionnaires, all with the same loadout, and the intent behind them is to have them kind of be a, I suppose you'd say primer of sorts for the other melee unit infantry units in my army. Now, granted, similar to assault intercessors in Space Marines and Black Templars, from my own experience, these guys perform exceptionally well with these loadouts, right? With heavy melee weapon on the aspiring champion of plasma pistol, and then you have, the heavy melee weapon, the other legionnaire of heavy melee weapon. It overall just kind of always works out, and the way I always play out the deaths of any models in this unit is I take the guys with the chainswords out first, and then I leave the aspiring champion and the legionnaire of the heavy melee weapon for last, if I can help it, if the whole unit doesn't get just wiped off the board. But moving down past infantry, or past battle line and into infantry units, I have one unit of 10 chosen. Now, this is the unit attached to Fabius Bile. I've had great success with using them and having them just be this absolute massive blob that comes out of a Land Raider or Rhino. I've experimented with both in the past with transports. And ultimately, I've found nothing but I've had nothing but, generally speaking, good experiences with this 10-man chosen unit with Fabius Bile. Sure, the wargear options that I have selected on them could be more ideal. I could run some combi weapons instead of bolt guns, but in my opinion, because I can't replace all of the bolt guns of combi weapons, I'd rather just have the bolt guns than the combi weapons, in my personal opinion. On top of the fact being, this army is more of it wants to get into melee, so I'm banking on their cursed weapons and their power fists to be what is tearing stuff up. Now, that also does seem paradoxical, because it's well, if they're a melee unit, why don't you have any with paired to cursed weapons? Truth be told, I don't like paired to cursed weapons and paired lightning claws. I think that they're kind of meh, right? You're getting two. I mean, yeah, you're getting 2 extra attacks and twin linked, but from my experience, the twin linked and the 2 extra attacks don't really make too much of a difference. So there's that. Next off, I have 2 additional units I've chosen. These are 2 5-man units. Originally, in a previous iteration of this list, I had a Master of Executions and a Chaos Lord, interchangeably. I've experimented with it in the past, attached to both these units. And I've overall had pretty good experiences with that. Right now, with this version, they have no characters attached to them. It's experimental. If it didn't work out well, or if it continues to not pan out with the use of these 2, I'd probably swap these 2 out for Possessed, which are another unit I've had historically really good experiences with, and I'd say pull their weight and then some. And then capping off the infantry section, I have 2 units of 2 obliterators. These are my deep strike units. The intended plan for these guys is to have, 1 deep strike in when it's my turn proper on turn 2 or turn 3, and then have the other unit be the rapid ingress obliterator unit. Now, granted, depending on the matchup, depending on roll-offs and whatnot, that also completely changes as to how exactly I use these guys. Historically, I haven't had bad experiences with obliterators, though I do find that their lack of range is a little bit painful. I wish that they had all of their profiles had just a little bit more reach, but that's more of a, well, you could hope, you can dream kind of thing, and it's not too much of a problem, because if you deep strike them in and you go into your shooting phase, because they have to be at least 9 inches away from something, you could still, in theory, deep strike them in. They're within 9 inches. Both of them are within 9 inches of their target, and you can still get your melt a shot off, and get the melt a keyword active. So other than that, with their abilities, for the obliterators, personally, their warp rift firepower, it's an ability that hasn't really come up as super useful, but maybe it's just more of a use case thing, and I haven't had the moments to get the best use out of their ability. But moving away from infantry, moving into vehicles, I have a Chaos Land Raider with I forgot to enable, or I forgot to have it have the Havoc launcher, but Chaos Land Raider with, in practice, all of its stuff equipped. I forgot to click it when I was getting this together a couple weeks ago when I was editing it. Now, obviously, there's the whole question of, why a Land Raider and why not a Rhino, right? Rhinos are cheaper and they're smaller and they can still carry the same amount of guys. It takes you a little bit more time to move the vehicle up and then deposit the guys, and then the guys that got deposited can then go and run off and have a happy murder party, right? Well, the main reason why I don't care for, well, number one, as to why I have a Land Raider instead of a Rhino, is I like the Land Raider. Just full stop, I like it. No questions asked. Number two is I find disembarking units out of, or getting models out of a Rhino and all within 3 inches of the Rhino a lot more tedious and annoying than with a Land Raider. And that is in part because the Land Raider is so much bigger than the Rhino. The bubble, the 3 inch bubble for the disembark rule is, in my opinion, not as annoying to deal with. Now, for some cases, like if we're talking about Space Marines and we're addressing the Repulsor Executioner, at least on Tabletop Simulator, it is annoying trying to disembark units from that, even though it's roughly the same size as a Land Raider. Still, I prefer larger transport because getting them out, getting all the models out, and them being properly spaced isn't so like aggravating. But moving away from the Land Raider and down to my main like tank units, fire support units, I have two Forge Fiends. Now these are two recent additions. I originally did not use Forge Fiends. I originally had used two Chaos Predator Destructors. Number one, because they're cheaper and they're roughly the same size, or like same total size. But the main reason why I swapped off of the Predator Destructor, the two of them, for two Forge Fiends is, number one, I was getting sick of the swingy nature of the Predator. It just wasn't ever working out for me in a way where it's like, yes, this felt like really, really, really solid. And more often than not, when I needed those las cannons to shoot into something tough, they wouldn't hit or they wouldn't wound, or if they did hit and wound, by their swingy nature of being a D6 damage, type weapon profile, they would do minimum damage more often than not. It just wasn't very helpful. On top of just like the volume of attacks you're making with those high strength, high AP attacks, it's not a lot. Yeah, at that point you could say, well, why not just swap the Destructors out for Annihilators? I wanted to use the Destructor over the Annihilator because I also wanted a vehicle that could still not only punch into tanks or punch into tougher things, but also still have good anti-infantry / anti-elite shooting, or if not good, decent anti-infantry and elite infantry shooting with its with its Predator autocannon and then its myriad of bolt guns and havoc launchers. But since then, I've ran with Forge Fiends. I've just come to the realization of like the Forge Fiends ectoplasma profile is on average more consistent. Yes, it's lower strength than the las cannons of the Predator Destructor or Predator Annihilator. I don't view that as really a problem because I've since used Vashtor not as a deep strike beat stick, but more of, hey, he's going to sit next to one of these Forge Fiends, or potentially both of these Forge Fiends, and they now have, strength 12 ectoplasma cannons. And if you're dark pacting, you can give these things sustained hits. That's potentially more hitting, more hits on target, which then equates to potentially more wounds. You can, of course, use its demonic ordnance ability to give dev wounds on its weapon. Yeah, it gives hazardous. In my experience so far, the hazardous really hasn't played a role. It hasn't caused the death of either Forge Fiend, though it has caused it's happened once. I failed one hazardous one time, but besides that, that was never a problem. Realistically, with this list, the biggest things I'm the most wishy-washy on, now that we've gone through it all, is I think for this list, the 2 units of 5 chosen with no character, honestly, I think I would probably swap out. I think the question is, what would I swap these out for? Realistically, my considerations would be possessed, because this is already a more melee-oriented army. And so rather than have the Chosen, who can kind of do double duty of like some okay shooting with their bolt guns, and then of course they have their power weapon or a cursed weapon, melee. Why not just swap them out for possessed, save a little bit of points, right? And then overall get faster Marines that are bigger, but they're faster, they're tougher, they have the same number of wounds, they have an invuln save, so like there's that, and then they can completely just blast something of dev wounds when you dark pact. That's a true consideration. In a previous iteration of this list, I used to run 2 units of possessed alongside my chosen, and just from my experiences with that version for the longest time, those possessed really pulled their weight and then some, and they just would not die. Um, the other thing or other unit in this list that I'm kind of wishy washy on, but not like as wishy washy as the chosen, would be the obliterators. Now, yeah, for a deep striking unit, the obliterators are probably my technically best option, because the Chaos Terminators, although total wounds is there's more wounds, um, larger footprint. Like overall, like for a unit of 5, there's just a larger footprint. It's gonna potentially take more wiggle room, and then on top of that, their shooting is not really good. Even if we throw in one of the Terminators with the assault cannon, it's still not great shooting. And then unlike Space Marines proper, they don't have access to all of them can't have power fists. Therefore, their melee is more middling, similar to that of Chosen. So I think for the sake of my like a unit that I can throw into deep strike or potentially even not, the obliterators are here to stay. On top of the fact being, and this is not taking into consideration that because of Creations of Bile, I could get lucky, right? Although you could consider the hyper adrenal infusion the worst or one of the lesser augments. This goes a long way for the entire army, for all the infantry. And since it's a infantry dominated list, the obliterators being able to move 6 inches is invaluable for them. Legionnaires, chosen being able to move 8 inches is great. Possessed, if they're in the army, moving 11 inches is great. It all in all, it works out. It's great, and that's also why I've kind of stuck with Creations of Bile over other detachments, is because this is, in my opinion, the most fun detachment to use. Yes, it feels bad when you roll double ones for it, or like double, like double of whatever um augment, and then you re-roll it because Fabius Bow's your warlord, and it's like, oh hey, look, you went from double twos. Okay, cool, you still have double twos. That's a feels bad moment. I've had that happen a couple times. But even with that happening, it never killed my enjoyment of this list. Never killed my enjoyment of the detachment. Yes, I have some qualms with the stratagems. In my opinion, not all of them are like, they're more. Some of them are more situational, but then of course you have diabolic regeneration, which is a very good like, hey, you killed one of my obliterators and the other one is still at full wounds. Okay, cool. One command point on my next command phase, that guy is back to life. It's great. It's fun. But with that, guys, I want to thank you all for watching and listening. If you stuck around to the end of this, I very much appreciate you. And I felt that, and if there's the question of like, oh well, why are you bringing up your whole list? Well, in the past, when I've talked about the Chaos Space Marine units and other things, I've brought up how, oh, this is what I use, blah 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 blah. Well, I feel like it's necessary now to kind of be like, hey, here's what I run, and this also opens up the door of like, hey, some suggestions. Maybe you guys can look at this and go, oh, he doesn't need 2 units of 5 chosen with no characters. He could swap those out for possessed or something else, and it work out maybe better, or maybe it's a little bit like a flavorful thing. I don't know. I just felt the desire to be like, you know what, like it's, I think, time to like divulge what it is I'm running around in my Chaos Space Marine games. Though I haven't played Chaos Space Marines in about 2 months, 3 months. I've since pivoted more towards Black Templars, leading up to when their codex came out, um, which I will be going over my army list for them and explaining and showing off like what I'm using. But once again, I want to thank you all for sticking around to the end, watching and listening. Feel free to like the video if you like it. Feel free to dislike if you dislike it. And of course, feel free to comment down below your kind of list. Whatever suggestions that you'd maybe consider, whether you think I should have these extra chosen or I should swap them out or take the obliterators out. Feel free to comment down below. As always, in the past, liking, sharing the video, subscribing, all that goes a long way to help. But you're not inclined, you're not obligated to do so. It's perfectly fine. But with that, guys, I hope you're having a great time wherever you may find yourself. And if you're not having a great time, well, I hope things can turn around and get better for you. But until the next time, we'll see you next time. Peace.